the advocacy of informed scientific findings. And finally, this event brings into retrospect that the youth are the ambassadors of our future. And since information is power, we need to empower the youth with necessary information and tools. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sandu, for your warm words of welcome and sharing and highlighting the potential role of the youths. Now it's my great pleasure now to request Dr. Andrew Shi, Director General of ECMOD, to welcome on behalf of ECMOD.
Your Royal Highness, Haji Ifema Chodn Wangchuk, Yunpo, I'd like to thank the Royal Government of Bhutan very much for ISIMO having the possibility to be present here and to organize this side event. And of course, I'm particularly pleased that we have the chance to organize the Youth Forum. I think this is a very important component for the summit, which has been organized with such effort and diligence by the Royal Government. Yesterday, I had made a phone call to Bhutan, and I was asking a friend there, what is the weather in Bhutan? And he told me, oh, there are some clouds. Then he told me, but the satellite image is actually promising nice weather. Very surprising. So he was actually referring to a very important remote sensing and GPS instrument. But then he told me, but there are some clouds crowding in from Tibet. They might create some bad weather and snow. That was the second surprising observation he made. Because in November, having clouds coming from Tibet is quite unusual. And what does it mean? It's probably a symbol or an element of climate change. So, these two examples, I think, represent a good example why we think remote sensing and GIS instruments are very important in relation with climate change. Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, we are celebrating today also the GIS Day. And I think it's important to highlight the importance of the instruments which are made available by GIS in general, but also by specific instruments. I think they are providing us overviews and help us to design and show very complicated situations in a simple way, in an impressive way. But in a situation where we are in the Hindu Kush Himalaya, with high mountains and difficult accessibility, I think these instruments provide us also an overview and access to information where we couldn't get access, where we couldn't have time to make field investigation. So I think it's a very important first approach to the difficulties, but also to solutions. And I think GIS instruments and remote sensing is a strong instrument for dissemination of information. So I'm very happy that we can celebrate this day together with the representatives of the youth. And I think it is very important that we take this opportunity. Now, why with the youth? We think that GIS is so quickly developing creating a lot of new technologies. And we have to be aware how we apply them, how we can use them practically. And the idea to work with you and to see what these instruments can bring and how you can work with them, I think is a great idea, and I hope that you will benefit from it to understand better our environment, but also that among your friends, and when you go home, you can explain better what means GIS, what is the meaning of the instruments of remote sensing. That we have this important regional event here. But I think it is going beyond. One generation here in Bhutan is a country which takes care very consciously of the environment and of the natural resources. That instruments of remote sensing are very important to better understand. But for us, Bhutan stands also as an example which is providing essential ecosystem services, which are providing important elements for the people downstream. And those few who have come from Bangladesh, from India, fresh water from the mountains is highly essential. But you might also be aware that mountains are a heritage of by looking for answers to future problems of food security. But we are aware, especially when we go through the streets of Thimphu, a lot of tourists are coming here. Why are they here? They want to enjoy the landscape. They want to recover from the stress of the city. And you realize also that mountains are a place of spiritual retreat. I think it's particularly important that we have this opportunity. Now, I'd like, and I wish that the participants of the forum, they will take home with them elements they are learning, and I hope you will be encouraged to use what you're learning in your own environment. And I hope also that your learning is in relation, of course, with the environment, that you will even better be ready to be very careful with the natural resources. And I hope, especially those who are coming from abroad, that you can take the message home that the resources from the mountains are essential not just for the mountain people, they are also essential for the people living downstream. However, we have to care for what is happening in the mountains so that we can assure the sustainability and well-being also downstream. And if you can carry such a message, we from Missimos would be very happy to be able to support you in future. And I hope that you will remain in contact with us, because we realize you, the youth, you will be the ones carrying the message, but also having the responsibility in future to make sure that the mountains and that Bhutan is going to be able to make its contribution for the well-being of all of us. With this, I'd like to thank you very much, and I would like to express my appreciation for your presence here, and I would like to thank the Royal Highness for her presence here. I really appreciate, and I think this is very important for all of us. Thank you very much.
Her Royal Highness, the Honorable Minister of Agriculture, dignitaries here on the platform, senior government officials from the government of Bhutan, ladies and gentlemen, and last but not least, the youth. I would like to say to you, Kuzu Zankola. My name is Carrie Stokes, and I am the Geospatial Information Technology Advisor. I am with the U.S. Agency for International Development. I live in Washington, D.C. USAID is an organization that works in nearly 100 countries around the world. We work with people to improve their economies. We work to reduce the incidence of disease. We work to improve environmental conditions, especially biodiversity conservation and climate change. We also invest in education in these countries, and we also help in their disasters to respond to them. We've also partnered with the NASA, the national, our space agency in the U.S. And we have created a platform that allows for the sharing of information gathered from space, and information gathered from the ground in the form of maps. This is my first time to Bhutan. And when I got the invitation to come, the first thing I did was go to a map. I wanted to see how far your country was from my country. It reminded me of when I was young, when I was your age and even younger. My parents had an atlas of the world on the wall in our home, and I loved to stare at that atlas. I looked at the countries all around the world, and I used to imagine traveling there someday. And I used to think about, what was life like for people in those places? What kinds of food did they eat? What kinds of clothes did they wear? What was their culture like? What languages did they speak? I dreamed of one day visiting many of these places. And one question I asked myself, too, again, I was a student. Do the students in those countries have to do homework like I had to do? So my love of maps began at a young age. That I could maybe see my house. Now, of course, that wasn't possible. It was a static map, it was made of paper, and it was on the wall. But I never stopped thinking about, well, what if I could just zoom in close and see what was really happening? We have information communication technologies. You have access to information that I didn't have when I was your age. How many of you have ever seen Google Earth? Raise your hands. Have seen Google Earth. Google Earth is a viewing platform based on the internet and allows you to fly around the world. Our geographic information systems, also known as GIS, allows us to see spatial relationships between different geographic features in the world. So by that I mean the river, the roads, the schools, the health clinics, the buildings that make up your community, the steep mountain slopes here. And when we talk about climate change, we're asking many questions. What are the impacts of climate change going to be on our community? We need to better understand what those potential impacts may be. The models that exist today, when we combine information from space, from our space agency, NASA, their partner, and other space agencies, there are multiple satellites in space right now monitoring the Earth. When we combine this information, it allows us to see the world in an integrated way. It allows us to ask questions that we couldn't ask when I was your age in high school. Some of the questions that are especially important for this part of the world are, how will climate change affect stream flow? How will that affect the availability of water in our hydroelectric dams? I bet you didn't realize that a map had anything to do with when you turn on the lights in your room. The electricity generation that comes from the hydroelectric dams in this area is greatly affecting your ability to have electricity on demand. And if we didn't have the geospatial information technologies to model, we wouldn't necessarily know how to manage that water resource. Using GIS also allows us to ask questions like, where should we build the next school? We need to know what areas are vulnerable to potential flooding or potential landslides, or steep slopes here. Himalayas. I challenge you today with the technology that you have available to ask questions, to answer questions that those of us who came before you had much greater difficulty asking. I challenge you to not just look at maps. The week here in Bhutan,
And I especially look forward to some of the answers that your generation will help to come up with to address some of the most challenging issues of our time. Climate change. Thank you very much.
And the youth friends from Bhutan, as well as participating member countries. I also would like to recognize here Professor Bruno Messerli, one of the most towering figure advocating mountain development all around the world. And I would like to recognize the presence of Professor Bruno Messerli. Can I have the... I'm very pleased and honored to be presenting an overview in the context of today's event, or more so in the context of this week's event coinciding with the Bhutan Climate Summit, Earth observation and climate change. I think this is gaining enormous momentum in terms of utilizing Earth observation in enhancing our understanding about the climate change. At the same time, we are also looking at Earth observation and climate change from the perspective of the mountain context, mountain development context. That's where the ICIMOD comes from. And I'm very pleased to have such a number of youth colleagues, in a sense that these are also meaning that there are new technologies that are emerging. So this whole week effort is also to equip young generation the kind of technology and the kind of tools in order to understand the daunting challenge of climate change. I would like to introduce my institution, ICIMOD, by simply showing this slide. And just would like to underscore saying that this is a knowledge development center, and one of the chief commodity that we deal is information and knowledge, which is very, very vital in today's world in terms of dealing with any issues, and more so from the environmental challenges. Now, we all know climate change is happening, and also we all hear about the climate change impact on the Himalayan region, creating enormous pressure on this beautiful landscape, creating very high demand on some of the natural resources, natural heritage, natural resources in the sense that water, energy, food, biodiversity. And I think this climate summit, under the guidance and vision of Limpos, to secure, in terms of enhancing our security in terms of water, energy, food, biodiversity in the context of mountain areas is very, very timely and very, very vital. Not only that, also the question of cultural heritage and others. But the key question is how much do we really know about the impacts of this climate change is going to happen on our landscape, on our system. And in my own view, I think we are in an early stage in terms of how to adapt, what to adapt, and how we develop an instrument in terms of mitigating climate change and so forth. And the key question here is, I think we need to enhance our understanding of the climate change. And that's where I would like to bring the context of Earth observation. Now, talking about Earth observation, space technology, why Earth observation? I just would like to show some of these figures and some of these graphics. And I'm sure all these are very close and dear to all our young friends. And these are also very, very vital in our day-to-day life. And probably we don't realize so much in the context that space technology is influencing in our day-to-day life. Possibly technology has become so much pervasive in nature in a context that everything that we do is virtually influenced by space technology, the mobile, the smartphones. The moment that you call overseas and others, there are satellites, satellite communication and others, computers, internet, the car you drive, the navigation, GPS, the aeroplane, the moment you travel. And the most dearest thing is entertainment, television. Virtually all these things has influence about the space technology. Now coming to our Earth observation, one of the most mature or one of the most matured application that has reached in our part of the society